Every week that I watch Beastars is kind of like my enjoyment gets cranked up a notch. Obviously, when you get the whole Who Killed Tem, that really cranked it up a notch. But every week, it's just a steady climb of how much I enjoy this series. And this episode, from the reunion that I've been waiting for, Louis and Legoshi, everything I wanted to see, and definitely threw me for some loops, I have to say. You get the whole hospital scene with, someone who was so fearful in the moment, understands that, he can't live his entire life being afraid of carnivores and wants those that even did hurt him to not blame themselves and to just, we all have to try to be better. It was a mistake, he clearly didn't mean to do it, but, it's not like you shouldn't just get away scot-free. You should recognize your strength and work towards not accidentally doing something like this again. But then you get that final scene with Riz, and this bastard. Beastars has done a great job at making you despise Riz, where you understand the situation and what led everything to happen. And that's not necessarily what's made me dislike him on a personal level. I love the character being a part of the Beastars cast. It's how he hides and how fake he is around everyone. In the face of everyone saying, he got suspended. It's kind of unfortunate because he clearly didn't mean to do it. And he's saying, technically a truthful thing, that carnivores should know their strength. The last person who should have ever said that. And to see the crushing of the camera or the light, and then to see Legoshi just almost snap. And even though it would have been very bad had, Eren Yeager not popped up to say, hey guys, let's calm down here. Still, it's just you're waiting for that moment that Legoshi finally puts him in his place, or so you hope. I do think this episode brought up an interesting idea that kind of ties into Legoshi's own personal feelings on why he doesn't turn Riz in. He actually wants to fight him and beat him himself, where you have someone like his mentor and is kind of the person teaching him the ways of being a healthy carnivore is saying he doesn't blame necessarily carnivores for who they are born as, because he got lucky and was born as a panda, and he doesn't really blame people for their natural instincts. He just tries to basically correct their behavior rather than just simply turning them into the police. And it's really interesting because it almost feels like the direction and the message that Beastars' main point is that rather than simply punishing for the sake of punishment, rehabilitation and wanting people to change is the ultimate goal. Rather than looking at a carnivore as being, they want to eat meat, rather than saying just because they're born this way doesn't mean they're a bad person, but if your actions will hurt others, that's an aspect about yourself that should change. That seems to be the overall purpose and story hook of the show, is that by taking carnivores and herbivores and real world social issues, the whole message seems to be that people should change if an aspect about them is going to harm others. And depending on the action, obviously it'll be up to personal preference if someone crossed the line too far. Personally, I think Riz did, even if it wasn't intentional and it was just his natural instincts. His current actions and how he's trying to hide it, and how mad he is at someone like Legoshi for trying to throw it in his face, that's the type of character that needs to be locked up or worse. But certain characters, you see, this girl who seems so normal, just getting the medication and help she needs, but apparently did things just as bad. It's one of those things where it's a hard pill to swallow, saying what is the proper action for carnivores in this world? And honestly, based on Legoshi and just other characters who have been able to suppress their urges and also overcome them, if not feel bad for acting on them, in the case of accidentally ripping off an arm and having to have it reattached to one of their classmates. It's interesting about the direction they're going and the themes and morals that they're trying to play with, and they're doing a great job if I'm being honest. I think the reunion scene with someone like, obviously, Louis, who's in a completely different league of his own, with someone like Legoshi, who, lucky for him, he shaved his fur because otherwise he would have been caught as the one who was invading the boss's home in season 1 there, so the whole shaving of the fur definitely led him to be a playboy nightclub life a lot easier than if he'd still had his old look, and the idea that he makes this false identity and he's just so happy to see Louis. And at first I was kind of questioning, I was did they really have that great of a friendship? But when you go back and think about everything that happened with the central trio, Haru, Legoshi, and then Louis, he does respect the guy a hell of a lot, even though he was definitely envious and sometimes jealous of certain actions, especially surrounding Haru. And the idea that even in the face of knowing he shouldn't wag his tail, there's multiple moments where he does, it's such a cute little gimmick, and the fact that he really does value him as a friend and almost like an idol in a lot of ways was really fascinating to me. I think perspective is always a big aspect about Beastars and what makes it so interesting. Louis is looking at Legoshi as, he always saw you as this one thing, and clearly he's no different than all the other bastards out there. But when he goes in for that hug, or kind of forced hug, he realized that there's no meat on this character's breath in the slightest. He really is the same old big old goofball that he always has been. it's interesting how Louis sees himself as like, this is his role, this is what he needs to be. But someone like Legoshi can be that star, and it almost feels like they both look at each other as a better person in a lot of ways, and it's so interesting how someone like Legoshi is trying his best to drag him back to the school, when honestly at this point I think he is in the right spot. I mean, the gang's not going to go away, and I think having someone like Louis be their boss is probably for the best, all things considered, but then again, there's a lot of weird things happening, and you don't know the right solution. But that action scene, or actually there was a couple of good action scenes, the first of which when they're just kind of hunting down back alley scum, to then obviously the gunfire and things like that. It was just such an incredibly well-directed episode, and the only big question I truly have is, what is Legoshi's end goal with someone like Riz? Because yeah, you want to take him down and you want to stop him yourself because you want to prove that you can protect those. But at the same time, by letting him walk free, you could easily have him ultimately kill another, if not yourself, right? So it's interesting to see the direction they're going, and with 3 episodes left to go of season 2, I'm interested to see how they're going to wrap up such a big plot point for the Beastars story. I mean, it's going to be incredible for sure, but I think this was an episode that really hooked me in, and ever since that reveal, it doesn't feel like one of those shows where generally you have this big what if, who did this, and then you get it, and then it just kind of sinks down in quality. Here with Beastars, ever since that reveal, it feels like we had this big question, but now that we have the answer, our intrigue towards Riz and then Legoshi, and then obviously we have, new best boy who is such a little slut by the looks of it. To see their weird trio of a relationship of they all know this secret, and it feels like the biggest ticking time bomb that if the wire accidentally crosses, the whole school's gonna blow up. It really makes it into even more of an intriguing plotline, and I'm really curious to see who will ultimately become the Beastar, if we'll even get to see it in this season, because they mentioned early on that whoever catches the killer will be it, but at the same time, is that going to be a cliffhanger? Is that going to be like a season 3 type thing? Either way, it's really interesting, and I think Beastars knocked it out of the park again. Directing was really on point, I thought, especially considering the action scenes. They really used the 3D movement to their full advantage, and honestly, I'm just so excited to see more. The more you really look at, though, the whole murder plotline, this is going to most likely be the last point in the story that we touch upon it, and whatever happens with the resolution of the killer is going to shape season 3 or the next arc's content. But the question I have is, what is that content going to look like? I'm not actually telling you to spoil me or anything, but it has my mind racing because I really think it's going to tie into whoever becomes the Beastar, and that's going to shape the new kind of like what happens with carnivores and herbivores. Honestly, it feels too good to be true to have someone like Legoshi catch Riz, and then someone else becomes the Beastar, right? And then that may not be the best of situations, and then there's still the Haru situation, and it's just an emotional mess, and you kind of wouldn't have it any other way because it makes for such an engaging story with honestly pretty believable characters despite them being animals, really, if I have to be honest. Emotional, action-packed, a little bit of comedy, but a lot of rage, all things considered. Let me know your thoughts and feelings on Beastars this week down below in the comment section. What do you think, and where do you think it's going to go with episode 10 next week? If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, share your support, and hit that subscribe button if you have been new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.